right. Hello, everyone. Larissa Horton. I am currently the CEO of Sumer Sports. We are a football AI company. We build software for the NFL, NCAA. Prior to that, I was at Cisco, actually, with Savita. We worked on the same computer vision, audio, AI, a bunch of AI across the board, network on video. And before that, I was at Microsoft and my very early days in AI and NLP with the Speller, grammar checker, Xbox Connect, figuring out, same kind of story, the right skin types, the right voice ranges, whether it's audio, video, etc., and then applying it later on data. And I was one of the leaders in Power BI in the very early days. And obviously, anywhere there's data, there is AI, and so that's been my journey.
All right. Hi, everyone. Madeline Corneli. I'm currently a product lead for our AI and ML company called Exasol. And my journey has taken me through the data analytics space. So I spent 8 years at a company called Tableau, working on visualizations. I worked at a company called Salesforce, working from there. And then I ran a data science team at a smaller startup, and then moved over to Exasol. So I've kind of like followed my journey around, but the through line has very much been data and analytics. And I've always thought of that as the perspective of how do we help people tell effective stories. One thing I've noticed from everyone we've heard today is that when people mention a data point, everyone kind of perks up and like hears them more clearly. And so I think when we have data, we have ways to communicate that data, it makes us all more effective storytellers. And I'm really interested in how kind of analytics is going to evolve with the addition of AI. And both of these become additional tools for us to tell more effective stories, which as women is incredibly important. So, very happy.
Hi everybody, my name is Eve Logan Parker, long last name. My story is pretty mixed. I'm founder of a startup called Ignis at this moment. We specialize in digital accessibility of traditional immersive environments that is fully AI-driven, no manual, redesigning, clicking buttons, moving things around. So I do believe the future is intuitive and health-centered. Whether you know it or not, diversity is not only gender or backgrounds, it's also health profiles. Everyone has something of their own. There are about 2 billion people with disabilities. 70% of the population has some kind of health evolving health needs, and everyone is aging. Take it or not, every user of your business have something and they expect you to build it according to their needs. Mm-hmm. No one is doing it because, well, accessibility is an add-on. It is what the previous panelists discussed. The fixes vs shipping and launching new product features. So therefore, I set myself on the mission. I found my purpose in life. Spend my life for the people through the power of technology. Now, I have a favor to ask. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, take a picture of our panel and share it with me. I've been running around taking pictures of all of you, and I'll share, and I can do it for myself. So, and if you want to become best friends with me, make a post and promote our panel. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Liu. I'm a vice president at Tola Capital. We're an early stage VC. We're investing in companies that specialize in enterprise software. We've been around for 15 years, currently on our third fund, and we have just decades of collective operation experience together. My entire career has been in an intersection of problem solving and AI. It's really much driven by my love for quantitative challenges. So I did my graduate degree in mathematics at Princeton, and after that, I was really fortunate to be in the very first waves of enterprise AI at McKinsey. This was decades ago, and there was no ChatGPT, of course. It's not even any off-the-shelf AI software. So we had to go in and convince enterprise companies to let us build customized AI models that are suited for the specific problems. But then they quickly converted their skepticism because they started to see real business value really just use of us deploying these AI models. I then moved on to Microsoft, where I spent 4 years on the product strategy side of the Azure AI and cloud business. So most of my focus there is really to explore a lot of interesting opportunities embedding intelligence into the existing Microsoft product. And that was really when AI was at the very cusp of inflection. And now as a venture capital investor, I feel like we're in the midst of the AI revolution, and I'm seeing talented founders every day innovating every business, every vertical imaginable with AI. There's just a lot of potentials that what AI can do for us. And I've been really lucky to just be in AI from the very start to now the full like evolution of AI, and very happy to be here talking about you.
So a total dream team lineup. To kind of pulling the threads from our last panel, I would like to kind of open the conversation. What are some examples of bias that you've experienced or you've witnessed in your fields?
Yeah, it's really interesting just observing female founders and male founders from an investor perspective. They are very different in a couple of ways. Maybe starting from the very beginning before they even think about starting a company, the thought process is very different. I think male founders don't really have to like think too much. They have an idea, they just kind of go for it. But the conversation with female founders are very different. They kind of think about a lot of things that are honestly are non-existent. They think about, if I fail, I will disappoint my investor, who, by the way, is non-existent at the moment, right? Because they don't want to invest in them. They're worried about disappointing, their founding team member. They're also worried about disappointing their family member if they put in all these time and efforts and it just doesn't come to fruition. But I think that fear is really distilled in them that doesn't really exist with maybe their male counterpart, and it really kind of discourage them from starting their startup career. And even to the point of when they're in front of investors and they're pitching themselves, they really undersell themselves. I've seen that some male founders come in and say, I've had 3 startups in the past, all of them failed, but I've raised 10 million, which is frankly not really an achievement, but they really leverage that and really tell their story. But there are some really brilliant women who's like led unicorn, they've bought product leaders for decades, and then come in, they're kind of like, well, I'm new to the field, I don't know what I'm doing, but that's totally not true. They're just not selling themselves enough. And frankly, when you're a founder, when you're early stage, your experience plays a really big part of your success. And finally, I think the difference also shows up when they pitch what they build. So oftentimes, founders really anchor on what they have built and what they can show. They don't even sometimes talk about what's in their roadmap. And some of them are maybe 3 months ahead. That's very tangible. But you have some founders come in, they will pitch you a vision. When you ask to say demo, nothing has been built yet. So the confidence is very different, right? So we just really want to see founders believe in themselves more and take more risk.
To add to that, because we were talking about this in our prep, I think it actually starts right from when you apply for a job. And first started getting created, I would say like the first that we had at Microsoft was probably like 2005. It was already AI, ML, NLP teams. The number of women who were willing to apply for the job was like, well, I don't have all of the requirements, so I'm not going to apply. This is potentially a risky team, but the team may not exist in 12 months because it's not really clear where this team is going, where this technology is going, and that risk averseness led to less women applying, less women getting jobs, less women getting experience right from the get-go. I mean, that was 20 years ago, right? This is when I had started in NLP. And then when you bring that all the way up to what you're talking about as an investor, as a CEO now, I talk to investors every week. And when you hear the kind of questions that people are asking, and when I look at how men pitch versus women pitch, it is incredibly different. And that risk averseness is so ingrained. And I would say, for me, as a child of an immigrant, there's like an additional layer on top of that of the level of risk averseness. And you're kind of brought up to be thankful for everything you have, which is a good trait to have. But there's also this risk of like, are you really trying to ask for more? Like, are you really asking people for their money? Like, how dare you, right? And so I think those kinds of things show up in how women are progressing in AI because they're scared to take the job, they're scared to ask for help, they're scared to push forward when the counterparts that we're seeing in the industry are doing it even after 3 failures, like you mentioned, right? It's like, well, I've only had 3 failed startups. Like, why not the 4th? Why not invest in me the 4th time? So that risk is a big part of it, and I think the way it's shaping up as leadership roles as well in such an ambiguous field, this comfort of you're not going to know, but like don't worry, you can do it anyways, is not something that is as common in women.
Having entered the football space, you can imagine not everyone I work with are men. Half of the team that works for me came from the NFL. They've been GMs of NFL teams, scouts, coaches of NFL teams. And they looked at me and they're like, wait a second, you're the CEO, like what have you ever done in football? And why are you our boss, right? And that's a very natural feeling for people who are working in an area that have never encountered a leader, that's never worked in with women who have gone through this space because it's just so rare. And it's interesting, like my response was like, well, when have you ever built AI? Right? Like it's like they've never built any AI. Like they've watched him coach football their whole life. So it's not a comfortable natural position for us. And I think it's really important to lean into that.
Yeah, and also brought up a good point around the willingness to ask for help. Oftentimes, I will be on the first call with a founder, and we even established that we're not a good fit, but they'll ask for like the head of product at this AI company we just met. Versus sometimes I've known a female founder for like years, and they wouldn't even want to ask me like a connection to our portfolio company. And if we do make a connection, they would be so thankful. But just know that it's okay to ask for help when you're a founder, or just like as you progress your career, you're out there fighting for your own success. So, and no one's really going to say she asked for help. I think that's too much. It's always okay to ask.
When in doubt, just take Rose's approach with good clap back. Melody, how about you both thinking about AI bias that you witnessed or seen in the fields?
There have been some very interesting examples just today that people have brought up, and I think there's a spectrum of like kind of really egregious ones, especially I think in the healthcare field. We've seen a lot of those, and those are probably impacting all of us, either indirectly if not directly. But there's also some sort of like insidious ones that I think sneak in sometimes. And so even though it might not feel like a big deal, this came up, I started a new role about a year ago, and I wrote, went on and did my little LinkedIn, excited about this new role, and I wrote a description of why I had chosen this role and what I was excited about, and then for fun I threw it into an image generator, and I said, hey, like build an image off of this description that I'm going to post on my LinkedIn. Here's my LinkedIn profile. It did its whole thing, and it put a man in the picture. And I was like, okay, yes, but like put a woman in the picture. And it put a woman in the background of the picture. And I was like, okay, this is my LinkedIn profile. I would put a woman in the front and it took, I think, 4 or 5 rounds of me like explaining exactly what I wanted. And, it was kind of like funny, but also frustrating at the same time. And it made me think about, I think, an experience we've probably all had, where you're in a room and you're looking around for someone who looks like you, and they aren't there. And I was having that experience that I've had in real life, like mirrored to me from AI, which was very, concerning. And I can't remember exactly who brought it up earlier. I think I've heard it a couple times, but AI is just building off of what we're feeding it. And so if you're feeding it biased data, it's going to reflect that. And if we're teaching it in not appropriately representative environments, it's going to reflect that back at you. So that one just kind of stuck with me, and that, it shows up, and it's one of those things that like you could let it slide, but we shouldn't let it slide.
We talked about it during our preparation. Similar experience with trying to generate an image for Middle Eastern woman. I want a woman by herself, wearing fancy clothes in certain colors, smiling. What the system gives me usually, woman stands next to a man, leaning on him, holding him, attached. Woman stands behind a group of men, wearing a scarf, or woman kind of in the curve, maybe in the kitchen, which is ridiculous, knowing that Middle Eastern women leading the business as well. As Dutch says, outstanding, independent. Sorry, Dutch words come first. And the image should not be feeding me this information because I need to ask for it. This is the system. So everything in the data set trained on historical data is biased. The problem is we assume ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, whatever name, any system that gives us the information we ask for. We don't challenge the output. We don't ask for sources. We don't check, is it actually the source? What we discussed earlier, right, the medical data, and Larry was speaking about it, is sometimes based on AI assumption, who in some pieces of information creates a nice storytelling. Now, why am I in this field and an advocate for mitigating biases? By putting effort yourself, training AI, checking what's in your data set if you're building AI applications, and bringing every single human being, gender backgrounds, age groups, health profiles, to check it and test your product together. Like at Evenus, we have the layered fixing scheme, right? It's testing the product. If it's a male team building it, because we have task forces, the way I put my team together is man, woman, if I have non-binary people or transgender, they all involved in different task forces. And then once their part is ready, is go into another team that is different backgrounds, different identities, different representation, to test what they do. Whether it's data sets, whether it's UX, UI design, and so on. Now, why am I an advocate? Since I started in 2005, basically, with Alcatel-Lucent, when it was 3G times for networks and fiber optics, and the first application of telemedicine, I actually covered every advanced step in my lifetime. I'm looking at oral for quantum computing. I'm not there yet, but I will be talking to you soon. Every single technology, no matter what it is, data is the great case, but everything else is biased in approach. Because we humans are biased. We cannot be non-biased. Because we do have our own understanding of the world. So if I'm looking at you, and I can't have a bias because your curly hair is too much for me, you remind me of my, I don't know, funny uncle who really bugged my lifetime like every day, and I don't like my uncle. So I may not like you just because you remind me of something. Sorry, just an example, right? I like that. We need to control our forces, as it's said, to not assume, don't make an, you know how assume is written, right? Out of you and me. To spell it for yourself, so I don't have to pronounce it. But be careful how you perceive people. They're all different. And be careful putting that projections and thoughts into your data sets. They will stay forever and only multiply. Now I'll give you a very scary future, and then I'll pass the microphone to whoever wants to ask a question. My fear is we are rushing. We don't have a solid foundation. When I'm focusing on digital accessibility, I'm building a solid foundation to bridge traditional with immersive in the right way that you can build all your AI hacks on top of them. What we are doing right now, we are putting 500 billion plus into supercomputer data centers, super something futuristic we don't even know yet, and we call it the Manhattan Project because it is, and say that it will finally give us AGI, artificial general intelligence. I said, wow, fantastic! We've all been waiting for that. To take the biases from today without fixing them and put it into artificial general intelligence. Do you know what it will cause? If you are dependent on a mortgage, you probably will be bad according to your profile. You are lucky if you're a white man, just saying. If you are dependent on certain medical care, you could probably be not included in the best deals possible. You pay the full, insurance cost, just because you happen to be a woman with maybe some disability, maybe something because you're risky, and so on and so forth, right? Do not rush things. Don't ship that product if it's not ready. Fix it. Stop your team members. Give them the reason not to run and rush. It's just harder to fix later. When you can do it now, that's a money on fixing it all. So, thank you for giving me a minute to just express my emotions. I'm so bored with them. Karen, back to you.
There's some really good themes there. I appreciate especially the comment about designing intentional teams, thinking about the data that we're using for algorithms from a market perspective, especially. Now, you mentioned very often some really good examples, especially as an end user. So, what are your thoughts on how we put that sense of bias?
Oh man, I think we all here have really important ideas about how to do that. I really love the how you approach it, where you have different groups of users testing things, testing AI solutions. And I think what I've heard a bunch today is we all need to be using AI. And I think there's the ideal world where we have a brake system that can catch things before they go out the door and before they make mistakes. But the reality is a lot of the stuff we are going to catch as it's happening. And I've been reflecting on this just today, and I have glanced around and I've seen ChatGPT open on quite a few people's computers. I'm pretty sure we all have used. Have raised your hand if you've used AI today. Okay, great. So I think that in and of itself is one of the most effective, I don't know if deterrence is the right word, but like stopgap measures for catching bias in AI, because we're all gonna see it and experience it. And also, like, we know what bias looks like and feels like. We all do in our own sort of unique ways. And I think earlier there was a session talking about like a bias AI agent, which I thought was fascinating. But I think there's going to be examples of bias that only people who have experienced bias will be able to identify and see. And so therefore we need to be using AI and we need to be pushing the boundaries of it. And I think that's going to be one of the most effective ways for us to be on top of that. And just like on a sort of personal note, I think, you know, when ChatGPT first came out, I was like, okay, I need to pick this up. I need to use this. And at first it felt kind of like a chore. And then I was like, no, like I sat down and I was like, I'm going to use this not just at work. I'm going to use this throughout my personal life. I'm going to use it as much as I can and just like try to push the boundaries for myself. And I think I used ChatGPT more this morning than I used like text and email. And it kind of doesn't work for everything. Like, it's pretty bad at coming up with recipes. I've tried to ask it to do that a lot. But I have a couple contractors coming to my house. I had to review everything they sent in, and I had to draft up an email, and I was like, what questions do I ask? And I'm just like, any task that I'm doing where I'm like, feel there's a sense of friction, or I have my own questions or uncertainty, I ask myself, could ChatGPT help me with this? Often it can't, but I'm trying it. And by doing so, I'm discovering what it can and can't do, and I'm also identifying like where it has issues, and those issues are things like bias. So just to like pull it all together, it's like I think one of the most effective things we all can do, not only to push ourselves ahead in our careers and our lives, but also to catch issues with AI, is to use it as much as possible and challenge ourselves to do that.
One other point I might add is when you spot a bias, you should be very vocal about it. And I kind of don't mean this like Karen, when I speak to your manager kind of way. I also kind of mean it. You need to tell, if you are a user, you need to tell the person who's your point of contact, really point those out, or you want to post them, because to the benefit of doubt, a lot of them, to the earlier group's point, they still have to balance between how fast you ship a product versus how robust it is. So sometimes they may not know sensory biases are happening. So you're kind of doing them, you're helping them by spotting that. But also you may be creating a little bit of pressure of like they need to pay more attention to diversity, to eliminating biases in the product.
I think when we talk about what's the point of the bias and what's the point of slowing down to make sure it's right, a lot of times from a business lens is really important. The point is you're not selling just to them. The point is you're not selling just to people without disabilities. And I think that framing is really important, because when you are running a business, when you're a founder, when you're a CEO, you have to think about why am I going to slow down and why is it important? And in some cases, maybe it's not as impactful, right? It depends on the product, depends on the industry, market segment, all of those types of things. But there are cases where bad mistakes happen and it's very hard to recover from that. And I think, Savita had talked about Cisco and the challenges we have there when we were there. And the reality is, when you have entire countries that you cannot represent with your AI, when you have entire segments of the population that cannot be understood, it is a problem. It is not just a social problem, it is a business problem. There's a lot of reasons for that. When I was working in Xbox and we had just started looking at potentially building conference room hardware and software, which was utilizing the same kind of audio video technology, it was interesting. It was like my first week at work, and I walked up to the Surface Hub. It was like the V1 of the Surface Hub. And I walked up to it and I started writing on the whiteboard, and we were in the middle of a call. And all of a sudden someone was like tapping me on the shoulder. They're like, hey, The other side has an 85-inch screen, and basically where you're standing, where the camera is on the flank, is directly on your chest. And so they had 85 inches of my bust in the other conference room. And it's like, why did we never think about the fact that you're standing at a board and the camera is literally at chest height? And if any woman was writing on that board, that's where it would be, right? So there's these kinds of things, like, do you think there are only men in boardrooms? Do you think there are only men that are gonna walk up to the whiteboard? Like, you have to catch these things, and you have to catch that bias, because how much more uncomfortable would you be when you find out that on the other side, the other CEO, the other person you're pitching, all they're seeing is your chest. Right? Like, this is a huge disadvantage to, like, as a founder, as someone who is leading and trying to raise money, like, that's not the impression you want to create. So the criticality of it is hard to imagine for many. I think the last panel talked really well about, the bias that is in the data, the bias in the people who are building those products, and we have 90% male engineers. They're not going to think about curly hair and where the angle of the camera is, because they don't have boobs to like worry about, right? But like, this is the reality for us. This is real, same with the voice frequency and whatnot. Like, another example is they put the close button at the top corner of the device, which was mounted on the wall, which for an average 5'5" woman would never be able to reach. So you can't close an application on this entire, so these are the kinds of things that until you think about the use case and everyone that is using it, you will never find these things. And for me, I think the moment I had a daughter, I started thinking about all the things that are unfair for her as she's entering the workforce, as she's going up against everyone in the industry. And that's when you become, for me, that became a very passionate moment, right? It was like, man, all of these things are gonna be that much harder for her because it's just not built for her. It's just not designed for her, right? Like, there's all these tools we see for left-handed people. That's like such a small segment of the market. Never mind every single industry that will be disrupted with AI. Every model in every industry that will now be on this. Every single job that she will now be concerned with going after because of the risk averseness that we've embedded in society, and women, especially in something that feels risky like AI. And so like, the impact is just so big, and why it's so important to totally understand go fast, iterate, you're gonna make mistakes. You don't want to slow down. Slowing down is not gonna help us. But at the same time, we have to recognize when it's wrong and have to keep going for this.
I'll say we also need to be creative. If I would know that there is a camera at this level, I would pitch my bra business. You are coming up. I'm just kidding here. But you're so absolutely right about cultural and gender and diversity-specific inputs to your data product and so on. I was leading the IBM Wilson. I don't know if you remember when the technology Wilson won the Jeopardy games. That's when I joined IBM. And my job was to first create awareness among the company that everyone understand that we need technology that is capable of so much more than any previous applications. And then I was leading an IBM Wilson in the emerging markets, making sure that all the big clients would understand and then buy this technology. What we do not realize, the new technology requires, on average, 4 years to be understood, to be implemented, to be tested, and to pair up with all the legacy systems that the client has. It's 4 years also for cloud technology adoption, as we were putting it all together. And that time, right now, accelerated so much with artificial intelligence and all the generative AI capabilities that we cannot even catch up with what we need to do on the agenda because there's so much that needs to be done. Now, once we're rushing back to the biases, and the biases are not only our personal, but every culture has their own understanding. I live in the United States, I come from Amsterdam, I was born in Russia, I lived in Cambodia, I covered a big chunk of the countries where I worked and built technology. Love tech. Don't take it away from me. And if I age and become blind at this right now, I know what I'm building for myself to be able to continue this technology. Now, every country has their own cultural specifics, and if you are building for Americans today, but you plan to scale tomorrow, make sure you learn what those cultures have and how they should be approached, because if you do something wrong and call your business in one way that is who looks after the necessaries, that's that market, you cannot go there, right? And then the technology will be also replicating the bias and so on. So always be observant, always be thinking, always be checking. Do not just go with assumptions.
There's a theme that kind of jumped out as we were preparing for this panel, and I can hear it in kind of the responses already, which is there's like two sides to AI. There's kind of the bias and the scary parts and the parts being fixed and the parts we're all worried about. And then there's the incredible opportunity of it, which we've talked about a lot today, right? The innovation, like what's becoming possible with AI. And I think that's a really interesting like dichotomy that we're all kind of sitting in today, which is, wow, this is so cool, this is so incredible, and oh my gosh, this is really scary. So I don't know that I have necessarily, I don't know that there's a solution to that or you know, some deeper insight, but I've sensed that theme, I've seen it today, and I think it's really interesting. It's something I think about like every day where I'm worried about both the impact of what I'm building, but I'm also always thinking, could I be going, not necessarily faster, but could I be more innovative? Could I be more efficient by using AI? And so I kind of just want to call out that like that balance that we're all trying to find.
I do think it's going to create a ton of net new opportunity, and I'm going to use my own experience. I was at the Combine this year. NFL Combine is when all the incoming draft comes and does their runs, their weights, etc. And I was sitting with one of the coaches, I think it was from the Steelers, and we were talking about computer vision, and is it really good enough, and is it really ready? How much better is it than a human scout who's been in the industry for 30 years? And I brought up one of the plays that they were talking about, and the player they were talking about, and we were looking at the player evaluation. And it was really interesting because he remembered this play a very specific way. I, having no experience in the NFL, called out a couple of things that were happening in the play that he didn't see. And he was like, "How did you know that?" I'm like, "Well, the model said all of these things, and here's why, like, here's the anomaly detection, here's what happened. Why did your O-line get beat?" "Oh, because I can tell you why." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I can tell you, your O-line was standing right here, his hips was facing right, he got beat on the left. And the amount of time it took him to move from left to right to left was too slow, which is why he got beat." And he was like, "Oh, we didn't notice that." And then it was this very weird, like, how is this woman who's never been to the NFL telling me about what happened on my snap, where, you know, that was the snap that led to us losing the game? I think there is a ton of opportunity where if you're leaning into the AI and not doubting the fact that you don't have experience in an industry, you can actually lead in an industry that it's giving you an opportunity to lead in an industry that does not require any more than decades of experience. It does require taking risks. It does require having these very hard conversations and learning about things at a pretty fast rate because AI is moving very fast, right? And I do think understanding the foundational issues with whatever AI you're using. In this case, like computer vision has been around for a while. Computer vision for football has not been great. Why? Because of video segmentation. It's one of the few sports where you have piles of bodies on top of each other, and it's very hard to understand who's armed, whose jersey, where the grass is, especially if you're wearing green. Like, there's all of these situations that make it very difficult, right? But when we can go and take that and show to people who believe they are experts that you can learn something with AI, even when you're not experienced, it creates an eye-opening moment that is like shocking for you, right? It's like, I don't understand how this happened. Like, you don't know football, your dad wasn't in the NFL. Like, the guys I'm talking to 3 generations. One of the guys that worked for me, John Idsick, he used to be the personnel director for the Seahawks. His son is actually the whole coordinator for the Panthers right now, and his dad also was in the NFL. When we have conversations, it is one of the most interesting conversations because he does not know anything about tech, and I don't know football for 3 generations. But when you find people that are open like that to teach you, who can teach each other, you create this amazing cohesion of knowledge that will take you so much further than just trying to do it on your own and not leveraging AI. Like, this is where AI can be such an accelerator for your careers in such different industries that you never even imagined yourself being. I never thought I'm going to be working in football, but it's been. We worked in industries that were platform industries where you have to serve retail, finance, healthcare, government. And at one point I was like, I kind of just want to not worry about people dying because the network's down or 911's not working. I think it's time to do something a little more fun, and hence the move into sports and a lifestyle. But look at what is possible, right? It is possible to enter an industry you may know nothing about and just leverage your AI knowledge and become a leader in that niche.
I totally share Marissa's sentiment. Like, there are a lot of horror stories out there about AI, but to me as an investor, this is really a unique moment in time where AI is leveling the playing field for founders. It's the amount of democratization on AI is just incredible. Like, you definitely maybe have to be an engineer today, but I actually think in 6 months' time, you might not need to know how to code. The AI assisted coding is so great that you can come in from any background. There's so many models that you can choose, and you can just build an amazing product with it as long as you have the vision, you have the passion for it. And to Larissa's point, you can now disrupt really legacy industries that were dominated by men. Like, those relationships exist on Rolodex, right? But now actually it's different for you as a female founder. You can go in, you can do really interesting things that are totally different with AI. And lastly, like, because we talk about biases, because evaluation for AI model is such an nascent field, and there are honestly not a lot of people working on it, both from an academic side and also from a business perspective. You as a female, your voice is actually, it can be heard. You imagine if you like raise your hand and say, I want something different in terms of how we evaluate our models and our product, that will make a huge difference. So I do actually think you should feel really empowered to be in this era of AI.
Well, and so I actually want to pull on that for a little bit more and just keep building this momentum into this upstart of AI. Okay, so in your world, what are some of the trends and things that you're seeing from our co-founders and from women leaders?
Yeah, I think I love seeing more female CEOs, but I actually love even more to see women CTOs because they're driving really fundamental changes, both from an organization standpoint, but also in the technology. They're actually have this really unique value of we want to create product that serve the community that reflect the community that we serve, and we want to continue to drive that diversity. And they've done surveys that actually diverse teams, especially when the engineering team is diverse, they drive better innovation, they make better decisions. So I think for us, we have been always, this is non-negotiable for us. We always want to invest in founders that are diverse and that also want to continue to foster that environment. The other thing I would say is, for us, we have seen female founders putting themselves out there a little bit more, which I really love. I think visibility really matters for founders, also for female execs, female leaders. Like all of us don't really actually get a recognition we deserve. It's not really normal for us to go and seek that, but that's so important for the growth of your business and for your career. So both being active about seeking that platform, but also being open to provide that platform to your peers. So even, for example, for an amazing conference like today, be more active about looping in more with friends and sharing that platform with them.
So we are going to open this up to questions, and there are one final one. So I already had your hand up a minute ago. Hold on to it. I'm coming to you. My last question for our panel is just, in this time of rapid change and growth, how do we make sure that women are left out of the equation? What are some things that we can make about? Madeline, let me start with you.
It's a big question. I think there's a lot of ways to answer this. I'm very excited to hear what you all have to say. I think one of the strongest and most effective things we can do is elevate each other at the end of the day. I think there's just something so incredibly meaningful about elevating the people around you, and I try to do this with all of my peers, and I try to do it regardless of, gender, ethnicity, background, experience level, but there's something incredibly special about being able to look at a female colleague and look at this amazing thing that she did. I think in part because we're not always taught to do that for ourselves, and sometimes kind of the cheat code is to do it for someone else. So I try to carry that one with me.
I've been blessed to have over 2 decades now in tech, and I've made some really interesting hires and confused people, like hiring someone who's 38 weeks pregnant. People were like, what? She's gonna go on leave as soon as she starts. And I think these are perfect examples where we have to lead by the example, right? You hire someone because they're good, regardless of the current situation. And by doing it, you're allowing everyone to open up their thoughts of what does this really mean, right? Similarly, I worked from home after having my 3rd child. I was an SVP at Cisco Med, and Savita probably has even seen this. I've had a cover on my child while I'm nursing, doing a call. Why is this important? Representation is really important. Showing someone that it is okay to do this is important. And I think when we talk about like what could you be doing, I think changing the norm in everyday actions, especially where you see anything regarding to AI, like just leaning in and being an example, I do think is really critical. And for this group in particular, given the expertise that is in this room, given the reach of this room, I think sometimes we forget that those very small things, like bringing your child to the conference and having them show up on video, or hiring people that you would not expect someone would hire, like those small things speak volumes. And it actually makes so much more space for other women who are in these situations. So I urge all of you guys to maybe not overlook some of those small actions, because to us it might be a small thing, but by being the first to make that okay, we're making it okay for a lot more people.
I stand for broader diversity, and having more women is highly important, but also non-binary people, transgender people, because that's where we get everything from training our AI or just living happily ever after, because everyone is included and it's their right to have that movement, right? With givenness practices, I'm testing on some different models, and RWIAI's workshop was specifically focused on human-centered application of technology, but also organizational structure. We do hire any gender. You come to me or to our organization and you say, I'm interested in joy. We figure out what's the need of the business, and we have the job description. But at the same time, we ask what's your passion. Because I don't put you in the box in my job description. I design the job description around you. Because if you're happy, you bring more value to me, to the work, and to yourself. Right? That's the first step, passion-centric recruitment. Next step, always be testing. You bring ideas to the table, fails, what fails, but you test, report, document, move forward to improve. So that's where everyone is important to play a role. Men, women, everyone. Last but not least, to have more women is highly crucial at the stage of the drop-down rate in education for women being involved in academic courses related to computer science. And that becomes very scary, because if we don't cover this, we cannot move forward with diversity and representation. What you can do all is to find someone that you can support. If it's an intern, like we are partnering with Northeastern University for an internship program. If you're a student from Northeastern University, let me know. We'd love to treat you as well. But at the same time, you can make an influence to others. So if you find someone you can support, ask them what's their goal. People do not know how to get to the realization. Help them drive that path forward. And maybe by doing so, you can change at least one life to become make it better.
I think these are all really great points. My additional point would be to really either find or create community and have cross-functional dialogues. Like the one we're having now between product leaders, execs, founders, and investors. These dialogues are really important because oftentimes I feel like we feel really lonely in our career. We often encounter challenges I think my male peers just don't fully understand. And not until I have these conversations, I realize actually I'm not alone in this. A lot of female leaders encounter the same situation, would share insights, would have these candid conversations. And I do feel like those are the moments where I feel like my isolation is turning to collective strength. So I do think, either going out there, finding a platform where you can identify other women that are going through similar journey, or just different journeys, but also being able to connect with them and collaborate with them is super important. Questions from our audience?
Hello, my name is Beth. I'm a student at Northwestern. For the students here, I wonder if you could share your wisdom on, from our point of view, entering this space that's rapidly changing, and our skills at this point could be obsolete in the next few years. How do we stay marketable? How do we market our value and stay relevant to employers and carve out our
Happy to kick off, I'm sure everyone has something to add.
Just let's check what the major is, because that's important. What is your major?
Computer
Okay, very good.
I think one of the challenges I see with people coming out of school is they already have a very fixed idea of what they should be doing and how their career should progress. And that is a very fixed box that you draw, right? I should be able to get a job coming out with a computer science degree that looks like this. And I should get promoted after this. And I think that actually is going to set you up for failure in certain regards. I'm all for having a very clear goal, a very clear plan on how you are going to measure yourself and hold yourself accountable to getting there. But very often, the recipe looks very different than what you probably have imagined in your head. And I think in this current world with AI, I had one of my coworkers' sons who graduated with a business degree, just deployed an app on the App Store. He did not know how to write code. He's not from computer science. But he had a great idea. He found AI to create code for him to launch an app. His app is starting to get users. That is the market now. Okay, so that is who you're up against. And you have to understand that disruptive thinking is the market you're entering. So, having a degree is good, having some experience is good, but that is not enough anymore. I think being clear around what you can bring to the table and how fast you can learn. I think speed of learning, for me, when I interview people, I'm looking for coachability and ability to learn and like that speed. Why? Because you can learn anything. I can teach you anything. I can put you anywhere. You can get back to it. If you are fixed on your mindset of, well, I have this kind of degree and I don't really like healthcare, but I kind of like sports, or I never wanted to work for the government, then you're automatically going to limit opportunities for yourself. Many of us, and I think we talked about this, some of the previous panels did the same, have worked for so many different kinds of companies, and probably not ones we all wanted to do at some point in time. But we did it, and we probably learned both what we want to do and what we don't want to do from those experiences. And so I think coming out of school, being as open-minded as possible of all opportunities out there is really important, because you mentioned, Sophia, like the number of developers we're going to need will also decrease. That is a true statement. I was talking to someone who said, from Figma, you will hit a button and it'll auto-generate all the front-end code from the design. So all the UX developers, what are you going to do if you cannot learn a new skill and cannot attach yourself? At the same time, AI is creating so many net new jobs. Prompt engineer was not a job 3 years ago, right? Understanding RAG was not a job. Nobody knew what that was. And now there are many, many jobs in this area. So being able to be flexible to the needs of the market, I think is going to be very important.
I think you said it incredibly well. I think like the ability to learn is one of the most marketable and desirable skills. And I would put like kind of second on that list is I think being a storyteller is a really important skill. And that's going to look very different for lots of different people, but it allows you to take your own experience and communicate it. And you might look at your own experience like, oh, I did like this one project for this one class, I guess that's not really relevant, I don't really know what to talk about in this interview or something like that. Or you go in there and interview and you're like, hey, I built this end-to-end application that does X, Y, and Z and has back-end integrated, right? So the way you tell your story is incredibly important. And that's a lot of what people are going to look for. And that skill you can carry with you as well. I think everyone here, anyone who's has built anything, knows that being able to communicate why that thing is important is the most important thing to be able to do, and that is effectively storytelling. And so I would say, I'm always trying to practice this, people are like, why are you building this? It's like, okay, that's a story. It's because it's going to help someone do something better or differently or do something they couldn't do before. That's a story that you're telling. So I would say your ability to learn and then your ability to tell your own story, but also the story of what you're building or what you care about in a way that matters to people is incredibly important as well.
You just reminded me of something we talked about yesterday, which is a lot of the coaching that I do is of moms. I have 3 kids of my own, and many moms were either not applying for jobs and kind of pushing them to go apply, but as well as when we do some interview practice, I ask them about well, what did you do today as a mom? Well, I got up, I made breakfast for the kids, I got them out the door, made sure that they were ready for their activities after school, I made sure I responded to all these emails around whatever PTA, blah, 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 blah. I did all of these kinds of things. And when I look at their resume, none of that shows up. none of what they do every single day, they're kind of like a built-in CEO of a household, shows up in terms of understanding the emotional dysregulation of all the people around them, dealing with the ambiguity of something happening and you have to quickly react and figure out a solution because there is no other option. There are so many skills you have that I don't think people realize they have, and nor do they think about how would I apply this ability to different types of problems. And I think there's actually a lot more there that we can pull from than we realize, and maybe it's because we don't self-reflect and want to identify those as strengths. If that is socially, not really acceptable, it's not nice to boast about what you can do. That's something we hear told to little girls all the time, but you have to find what is that skill and how you apply it to different places, because that also gives you a leg up when looking for a job and presenting yourself and looking at your team.
Startups receive funding just for their idea. Anyway, doesn't work, right? No graduate get a job just because they have a degree, unless you probably like Ivy League and something else, maybe they'll consider. But this is not what you're hired for. You're hired for the portfolio of experiences that you actually did in your drive and your community work and your social engagement, and something that you have online, constantly updated. Don't forget what we just discussed, learning points, right? You need to have all your certificates. You need to constantly be learning new skills. Like right now, I am an MBA student. I already have master's, but now I'm MBA in IT management, and I'm getting my certifications, certificates in Salesforce and Databricks, name it, constantly. Because your experience will be expired if you don't put enough effort. So always be learning, and you don't have to be a student, everyone. Always be learning, because the time comes when you are checked on what you have done. My favorite story of all time is a friend of mine who got a job at Microsoft, not because she was a great coder or something. Her kid was dying. It was such a rare disease that doctors couldn't figure out what's the right medicine. Her community of parents were all concerned because nothing worked for their kids either. What she did, without any much coding, she had the basics of data science. She decided to pull everything together before ChatGPT was, and run different tests by herself, so she figured something out, that her kids started feeling a bit better, the next day a bit better, and a bit better. Her combination was shared with the community of parents whose kids became better, and now it's a standard in the medical field, helping all these kids as her kid has this disease. She got the job at Microsoft not because of her CV, because she shared the story of what she did. And those examples are very unique. Do something that matters. And then we work with you as an employee, as a leader, as a mother, as a wife. Just share your story. Be you and celebrate it every day.
Maybe let me first start by acknowledging this must be a very daunting moment for you. I remember when I was your age, this question of like, I'm leaving school, where I spent most of my life into this brand new world of professional career. That's like a very, very scary moment. And I can only imagine that's so much worse when the world is changing with AI, right? My advice is very counterintuitive. So I think you have to ignore what the world is telling you, what your right career is, because the right job is only the job that suits you the best. So I never really imagined out being in VC. My dream job when I came out of college was I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be an actuary because I thought I love math, I love building models. Therefore, I would love building models for insurance companies. But guess what? I discovered more about myself. I actually don't like sitting in a cubicle. I don't want to interface with any human beings. So I think the answer actually is to really dissect and understand what you enjoy as a human. I sort of shifted from consulting to Microsoft to my current role because I started to realize I really enjoy exploring really frontier technologies. I love talking with people. I love just learning about new things. And VC happened to be something that fits all of those requirements. And it was not going to be something that I thought I would do. So my advice is just to really understand who you are as a person and talk to a lot of go talk to other women and from different disciplines, ask them what do you do for work, why do you like it, what's your day-to-day, and that will really help you understand.
Football and apps at Boston was amazing. Very well.